to be spot on, or you're going to have an issue. And and it's hard. We're doing something that's very hard. And when you're in a team with so many experienced athletes, it gets a little, it's like, why can't I do that? And then you start talking to them and you realize they may have been doing it a little bit longer than you, or and you can speed up the process by listening to people that have done it before. But there's still an experience component. It's like, in my line of work, I'm a trial lawyer. So I can talk to people and I can tell them how to try cases, and it might help them become a better trial lawyer quicker. But in order to be good at it, you have to you have to go in front of a jury, you have to try cases, because no matter what I tell you, there's no substitute for doing the work. So so I was really happy with the improvement, and really happy with the plan, and yeah.
Okay. Awesome. I definitely wanted to talk about execution for sure, because I think that's like a huge part of the equation. But let's start off just real fast, like setting the stage for folks. Like, so this is Ironman Coeur d'Alene, your second Ironman. What was your first one?
So
was it Arizona?
My first one was Texas last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So a little bit of hills this time around, for sure.
Yeah. Yes, it was. I think it was a harder course, although when I was in Texas, we had the wind. So there was about a 25-mile headwind for about half of the bike, which was probably a pretty good substitute for the hills we were dealing with at Coeur d'Alene. Although I will tell you a funny story about Coeur d'Alene. The weather was absolutely beautiful, but for some reason, on the steepest downhill part of the bike course, there was an absolute downpour. So there was like one cloud over the entire state of Idaho, and it was on the downhill course while I was going down. Of course, so I live in California. It doesn't rain, and on those few times it does rain, the last thing you do is go out for a bike ride. So I'm like, I'm going downhill. I've got my brakes on. I'm not slowing down. I have no idea how much control I have over this bike. The only thing I will say is there were people flying by me, and they didn't seem to be panicking, or they seemed to be in control.
That's a good sign.
So I was like, hopefully they know what they're doing. And anyway, it didn't last very long, but it was just, I just thought it was funny that 5 minutes of sheer terror as I was holding on for dear life going down the steepest hill.
Of course.
In an absolute downpour. So
I think that's par for the course. There's always like one part of the race in everyone's race where they look back and they're like, really? Like, it had to happen like today, or that part, or just when I was there. It didn't have to be any other time when people were there. Now, I remember there was at Lake Placid a couple of years ago, they have around Mirror Lake Drive. So the bike comes in on one side, if the lake was a square, and on the short side, and then goes out the long side. And so it goes by the lake section, which is like the swim, start, finish. It's the mountains, like the weather picks up, whatever. So this guy was coming in at the end of his first loop to like literally a quarter mile from special needs. And that section there is where they let everyone set up their team tents or their family tents or whatever. Someone did not anchor their tent, and the wind picked up, and the tent like toppled over and took him off his bike. And he was okay, thankfully. But you could just see his face. What? Like, really? I got hit by a tent on a bicycle. What are the odds of that happening ever in my life? It was such a bewildering moment. So that's a pretty common thing.
I actually saw something similar happen to some poor guy in the Tour de France. He was riding along, you know how the fans get really close to the course. Somebody had some giant like flag thing that they were waving around. It was tied to some sort of pole, and right as he rides by, it snaps off that pole and goes across the course and gets all wrapped up in his bike. And
oh my God.
Yeah, and he goes down. He was okay. He got up and looked at him, was basically, what the heck, and got on. But there's some crazy stuff can happen.
I hear you. I think there's something about the day.
Yeah. That's what makes it exciting. But
I hear you. Okay, let's go back real fast. Then again, so second Ironman, did Texas before, so a little bit of a flatter course, which to me just is, I think, logistically easier to wrap your head around than a course where at Coeur d'Alene you've got the cold water, you've got hills on the bike, you can have heat later in the day. It's just I would say from like a level 1 sort of complexity course to a level 5. on a scale of
Okay.
1 to 10 of being more challenging for sure.
Yeah, the weather was nice. The water
Hmm.
was good. The swim, which it's funny because when I started doing triathlons, I was scared to death of getting in the water. Every time
Yeah.
I would get in, I would, and I think you and I talked about it at some point. You might have recommended like a psychologist or something. It was that bad.
It was pretty bad. I remember.
And but I actually was able to get over that, although it still is in the back of your
Yeah.
mind. But now, and I would hear people talk about, oh, I love the swim. It's the only relaxing part of the Ironman. And I was at that point. So I'm at that point now where the swim
Hmm.
was like the only relaxing part of the Ironman. It was actually enjoyable because you're out there and you're in your wetsuit and you
Hmm.
realize a few times it is impossible to drown with a wetsuit on. You can't
Hmm.
swim down in the water.
Right.
You just pop right back up. So once you are able to just realize that, it's like worst case scenario is you just float on your back until you feel better and then you go. And once you have that sort of comfort level, you just go, the swim becomes, now it's okay, how fast can I do the swim? You start
Hmm.
dealing with the issues that the more experienced people have in dealing with the swim. I need to go faster. I need to cut this
Hmm.
buoy. I need to try to swim straight. Whereas
Right.
I just want to get out of the water alive. And
Right.
once you get past that, then you can start to enjoy the races a lot more because
Yeah.
there's nothing like doing an Ironman. I done the marathon. I did Boston, which was a wonderful experience. I ran the Grand Canyon, which was a wonderful experience, but there just isn't really anything like doing an Ironman. Just
Hmm.
the atmosphere and the challenge and everything. They're just, to
Yeah.
me, they're just a little bit of a different level.
Yeah.
So it's
Totally.
great to be able to actually try. That was my goal, was to race it this time. It felt like in Texas, it was to survive. Whereas in this one, I felt I got a chance to race it
Hmm.
and learn some, and I think I'll do better
Yeah.
next time. I'll be able to race it a little bit better because I feel like my fitness is such that I can get a
Mm.
better time. But you keep talking about, it's just the execution is just so important. And
Totally.
that run is, it's not like running a standalone marathon. I don't care what anybody says. I know some people can run it
Right.
fast, but I don't have as much experience as some people, but I've done it enough now where I'm sorry, it is just not the same thing.
Totally.
It's just not.
Yeah. But when people say, "Oh, it's just a big long training day, but it's catered," I'm like, that could be further from the truth. It is not a big
Yeah,
long catered day.
yeah,
If you do
maybe,
that.
yeah, maybe if that mentally, if that's what helps you find. But I think Al or somebody was saying something about what happened to me, and I know it was like when you start out on the run as slow as you can, and I swear up and down that is what I did. Right, I went
Hmm.
out running as slow as I can, and then when I look back on it, I was running too fast. And so I think what happens is I had, my nutrition was good. I'm
Hmm.
not, I feel like I executed right with what my training was. I had
Okay.
the calories. I know people are like maybe a little bit more calories. I got off the bike and I felt good. I felt 100% better than when I got off the bike at Texas. When I got off the bike at
Okay.
Texas, it was over for me. And I had
Yeah.
26 miles to run. I felt good off the bike. I felt ready to really make a run at the marathon. And I grabbed some water and some Gatorade and I
Hmm.
grabbed a gel and I got some food and some fluids in me and I was off and I was going good. And I hit mile 6 or mile 7 and I felt like I was going to throw up. Like I got really
Hmm.
nauseous and I had to stop and slow down and walk. And I tried everything, right? I was trying Gatorade and I was trying bananas and they have like, it's a smorgasbord, right? They have
Right.
everything.
Oh, everything.
And I
Yeah.
went
Everything.
through and I went through everything, finally settled on Coke. And it took me about 6 to 8 miles or about an
Mm.
hour for my system to flush out and for the sugar and everything to get into my system. And I felt great again. And then I was able to run basically the rest of the marathon, but I had lost an hour and a half trying to
Hmm.
get my stomach back. And what someone was saying, and I think it just sounded exactly right for me, is that what happens is you get off the bike and you're supposed to be fueling for the run. So you still have food and whatever in your system, in your stomach. And then you take on some more food because if you've done it, you're feeling good off the bike. But if you don't start out slow, that food and that liquid sits there because there's no blood. The blood is now going to the other parts of the body. Your heart's pumping because you're not going slow enough. And it sits there and it sits there and your body's, okay, we need to do something with this. So you either need to slow down or we're throwing this stuff up. We're going to throw it up. So I didn't want to throw up. I know. I guess some people throw up, but I don't really want to do that. So I slow down. And then your system starts to work, but it doesn't start immediately. So it takes an hour for your system to recharge. That's all lost time, right? Because you're walking. And once you start walking, it just kills your time. And as I'm walking, all these people were running by me and I'm just like frustrated, but there was nothing I could do. Once I got my system back going and I was able to run, I felt great and I was flying for me and I passed all those people. I just kept thinking, and I recognized because you had the guy in the Pittsburgh Steelers uniform and you had all the people that you could easily recognize who they were because they were dressed unique. And I was able to then, even though I walked so much, by that time they were all tired and I was able to pass all of them and I finished good, which was the complete opposite of Texas where I just walked the last half marathon. I just walked. So anyway, so that's my experience. It's a fine line between being able to run that marathon. And I look at the elite triathletes on our team and there's a lot of them and they all run that marathon. They're all able to run that marathon. And that's, for me, I think, where I need to work on.
I agree, but I think you're not wrong. Like the second Ironman, there's a learning curve. And you're right. The people who are elite they slow down less. And by less, it means less time walking, less time administrating, less time whatever. And so part of being fast is doing all the things that you're learning right now. So these are things that I'll never do again. Like getting easy pass out here on the East Coast for your car. Once you can just drive through a toll booth, you'll never stop at a toll booth again. Like, why would I ever do that? Like before you didn't know and you just waited in line. Now and like you're checking those boxes off and you'll never do that again, which is great. I think also part of it is understanding like that lesson you learned about the nutrition, right? There's times when we do want to intentionally vary our speed, which gives us better overall performance. But in the moment, at that decision point where you're like, do I want to go faster or slower? That part of your body is, of course you want to go faster. It's a race. But the slower part of you is, just like you, for example, you mentioned being a trial lawyer. I'm sure if you're working with a rookie, you would tell him like, right here, we want to back off a little bit. It's tempting to go in, but you're going to appear too enthusiastic and you're going to skew the jury and things are going to go crazy. So just back off a little bit, let them absorb what we're talking about, and then we come back later. And that nuance is part of that process for what you're learning, because your training was great this time around. You did a great job complying. You were healthy this time around, which is fantastic. Big win. And you mentioned that you had a really solid bike, consistent bike. And coming off the bike feeling good is a huge win in a race. As you start going faster and faster, you start feeling a little less good because you're like, now you're starting to cut corners a little bit. You're like, maybe I'll eat a little less or go a little harder. But to have the baseline of I can put a 112-mile bike ride together is awesome. And then we get to the run. But so to your point, part of it is the strategy piece. And the next level for you in this next race is once you understand, these operating system rules for you. And these are things that you have to kind of write down, because it's one of the things that I think elite athletes know all the time is that they don't trust their instinct. There's a part of the time of the race where you have to race by instinct, right? So say you're getting pushed underwater on the swim, even though you're in a wetsuit, you're like, I need to get out of this scenario. That's your instinct. Do whatever your instinct tells you. There's not like a time to check my 5-step plan for not drowning when you're under the water. But same thing in a race. So there's a time on the bike, say, or at the end of the run where you're like, I just need to lay it all out there. Like, I have to, like when Jen was talking about her finish, when she found out that she was in contention for a spot, and she's like, I really don't have anything else left. I have to give 100% for as long as I can give 100%, and we will see what happens. But until that point in time, it's the reason why we have all that data and all that experience is to go back. And I mean, I've had that same experience in Coeur d'Alene. I remember I raced it in 2007, so a lifetime ago. And I remember having the whole plan and going to go out there and follow the pace and be really smart, etc. And I remember running and looking. We used to run out the opposite direction, away from town, towards the bike course, do a mile out and a mile back. So I remember running out that way next to this young guy, tiny guy, and we're both zipping along or whatever. And my watch was like, beep. And I'm like, oh man, I must be missing a satellite or something like that. he's like, "What's up?" And I was like, "Man, that was like a 6:25 mile." He's, "Yeah, we're flying." And I was like, "Oh my God, I have no business. Like, what the hell did I just run a 6:25 mile for?" I was like, "Oh my God." So literally we turn around and we go back and there's an aid station right there by the, not that far from transition. I walked the entire length of the aid station. It took me like 2.5 minutes, like literally walking and like high-fiving people because I had to slow myself down because I knew if I stuck with that person or if I thought this was going to feel good, it was never going to play out
Yeah.
in the way that I wanted. But I didn't, if I hadn't said something, I think it was because I was still coming up with the reasons why I tested for 364 days of the year happened to be wrong today,
Right.
right now in this race. And it was me, then I was fine. You know, the stories you tell yourself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a process for you, but you're well on your way
Yeah.
in terms of the progress.
I was very happy with the whole training plan that you put in. I know because I had to run the Boston Marathon, and as I was training for that, I was like, Coach P, I don't think I had enough. I don't think my miles were good enough. I'm not gonna have a great Boston Marathon, and not gonna have a good race. And I was coming out of I just had a lot of fatigue and everything, and I was going in. I didn't really feel like I had a good training block. And I ran Boston, and it was a great experience, and it was fun. And I didn't have a great time for me, but what happened was I then took my little recovery period after that, and I transitioned into the Ironman training plan, and I was like completely invigorated. I had just a whole nother level of energy, and I was like, okay, so this all makes sense now. So I had a smaller easier training block leading into the marathon, which led to not necessarily as fast of a marathon as I could have run, but it didn't burn me out for what is a really tough 12 weeks to train for an Ironman or whatever.
100%.
Right around 12 weeks.
Yep.
So I know exactly what you were doing. And part of it too is you have to trust the people that you're relying on to set you up for success, right? So, and when I saw that happening, it's like, okay, I'm gonna do every single training thing, not just the time, but in the manner that it says, right? So if it says, it doesn't just say bike for an hour, it says do 15 minutes easy, then do 15 minutes hard, and then do 15 minutes. So I did that, right? And when the runs, if it said run slow, even though I might have felt good, I ran slow. Or if it said, and I had a fast run during the week, and it said, okay, and I programmed my watch. Okay, so I'm going to do 4 8-minute intervals at my marathon pace or whatever the pace that was prescribed, and that's what I would do, right? So I think it wasn't just that I didn't just do the volume. I did the volume at the method that I was supposed to do the volume, right? So if it was the same with the swim, right? If I was supposed to do a 3,000 yard swim, I didn't go do my master swim class and do 3,000 yards of intervals, right? I swam for 3,000 yards, right? Because there's a difference between swimming 3,000 yards straight. There's a mental component there, and versus swimming 3,000 yards where you're in a group and you're stopping every 100 yards, but you're swimming the hundreds faster. So it might take the same amount of time, but there's a big difference. And I don't think I may have mentioned this before, but I probably did 4 of those 4,000 yard swims in training that were part of my plan. And I don't remember doing that last time. And I remember just dreading those 4,000 yard swims, right? Oh my gosh, 1,000 yards in a pool. Oh my God. But I'll tell you, that swim, that hour and 25 minutes, which was great for me, went by like that. It just mentally, it was just because now you've got all the added distractions of the people and the site and all that other stuff. And it just mentally, it went by so fast. And I think part of that because I was mentally trained to swim straight for an hour and a half, which of course now makes me jealous of all the people that get out in an hour and 15 minutes or an hour and 10 minutes.
That takes time.
That are under an hour, those are people that I'm really mad at. Everybody has their strengths and weaknesses, and so I just think that the whole thing went really well for me, just trusting the plan and following it, and that's why I really felt fit going into that race. And
Okay.
That just gets you in the, it's when I talk to people about trials, it's like, they're like, yeah, I'm going to prove up all the elements of the crime. And I'm like, okay, that will get you in the door. That's not going to win you the case. You're going to have to convince them that they should convict the defendant. And in a race, being fit, that just gets you to the starting line, right? That if you're not fit, you might as well not even show up, because it's going to be miserable. But it's the execution is what ultimately.
But let's zoom out though, because you're also executing on the training side as well, and I want to talk about that for a second, because that you mentioned the evolution of the training. Yes, there's the plan, and yes, I'm aiming for long term, but your execution of the plan this time around was better. And just so to contrast that with your race, where you had this block where you had to walk 8 miles, right, to get your stuff back. By doing the block this way, by training for Boston within the context of a year and connecting Boston to Coeur d'Alene, we put up like 6 months, almost now 7 months of just great work, which for future you is a massive, awesome investment. The alternative being, I'm gonna train for Boston. I'm gonna train hard for Boston, run Boston. Hopefully you don't get injured. Hopefully Boston doesn't nuke you because of what you did. And all of those things, which we know are super high possibilities, those take you down, right? So you come into the build into Coeur d'Alene, or in some cases Lake Placid, because Boston kind of fits that time of year. Then people are like, oh, I need to spend 6 weeks. I can't run for 6 weeks. I need 3 weeks off. My heart rate I can't get my heart rate up anymore. I can't do the work. What am I going to do? And they've really undermined their this. So the fitness is compounding. And every time you take that balance to zero or make it negative, we have to restart that whole process. So you're actually in a great place going forward as well. And that's part of that evolution, like showing up next time, knowing how to stay healthy, knowing how to follow the plan, having better guidance on like how I want to race. You're just accelerating that process, which is fantastic.
And it carries through. I did a 5K. We had our local 4th of July 5K, and I wasn't really going to, and this is a week after I did the Ironman, but I'd been following the recovery thing, and it'd only been a week, but I felt really good. And I went out and I PR'd that 5K, and I got first place for my age group.
That's unbelievable.
So my wife and I were like, after the race, I made her walk it. And so the race is over. We're standing around chatting, and they announced the winners for the age group. And I won first place, and I was like, I've never won anything. So one of the advantages of getting old, but still, it was like just the recovery was going well. So I'm very, very happy and very excited and very appreciative for all the help that you and the team and everybody, because endurance events are hard, and I appreciate the challenge, right? So I enjoy that. I enjoy the training, even though it's hard, and I enjoy the race, and I enjoy the challenge. It's what keeps you going. Now that my kids are old and they're off doing their own thing, and you're looking for something to fill that time, and this has been, for me, it's just been really good. So.
I think for me, I really appreciate you're super enthusiastic on the team. You always bring the energy whenever you show up. But I think that's part of your secret too, is like you're so excited. You're so eager to learn. I think one of the challenges that people bring to the table when they start getting into the sport and seeking some improvement or seeking excellence is we all have things that we think that we know. And you're right, you may know swimming, or you may know cycling, or you may know running, whatever those pieces are. But to your point, in the context of what we are building for this year, you may know running a marathon, but you don't know running after swim and bike, right? Like it's just a different game, right? You may know cycling, but you don't know what it's like to be 6 hours in the aero bars, having swum with your nutrition going left instead of all those pieces. I think that's part of what your superpower is. And I'm just super pleased that you put in the work. You've had your ups and downs. And like you always say, you've done a bunch of really cool stuff already. Like you did a bunch of bucket list items early in your endurance career, which is fantastic. So I'm excited for what's next.
Yeah, I am too. And it's not just it is bucket list things, but it's things that were never even in the bucket. In other words, I remember like when I started doing training for a marathon and I had a couple injuries, and I started trying to figure out, okay, is there something else I can do to keep my fitness up that doesn't involve running? And I came across Ironman and the triathlon, and I was like, oh, I'm never going to be able. It was like, there's just no way. I could hardly swim 100, 200 yards. To swim 2.4 miles in the open water, it just, and then bike 100 miles.
What?
That's literally, there's just no way I would ever be able to do that. And now I've done 2. So it's just,
Awesome.
it's just amazing what you can accomplish. Like you said, there's ups and downs. But I remember when I first started running, I was like, okay, I'm going to run 6 miles today. I'm going to run this pace. And then tomorrow I'm going to try to run 3 seconds faster. And then the next day, try to run 3 seconds faster. That was my thought process of how you get better. And then a week goes by and now you run 10 seconds slower. And you're like, wait a minute, I should be faster than I was when I started, because I started from nothing and now I'm fitter. And then you don't realize, okay, that's not how you train your body to run a race. You don't just try to run faster every day. I started from nothing, from literally not really knowing anything to here we are 5 years later. And it's a process. I know you talk about 3 years, and that's what it is. That's how long it takes. There's a reason you say 3 years, because it takes 3 years. And you can't, I talk to friends that are trying to get into the sport, and I'm like, you're not just going to go sign up for a triathlon and do it. It's just, you have to get your body in a position you can actually train for it. And it takes several training cycles, because it's a training cycle. And you have to go through several cycles and modify things and adjust things and change things and see what works and what doesn't work. And then you have the fueling, because when I ran my first marathon, I just ran until I couldn't run anymore, and I didn't understand. I said, what just happened? I was running fine. Now all of a sudden my legs feel like I'm running in a bucket of cement. And so I got done, and I start Googling marathon, and they're like, you need to eat. And I'm like, wait a minute, you eat during a race? What the heck is that?
Who are these people?
I ran 1 year cross country. We were done in 15 minutes.
Exactly. Totally.
Oh, you're supposed to drink stuff too. I'm like, oh, that's what those aid stations were there. You're actually supposed to use those. I thought those were for the people walking. I thought that was for the slow people.
For those other people. Oh my God, that's so funny.
Me. I'm running. I'm not walking in a marathon. I'm running the marathon.
Hello.
So you're like, yeah, you got to try these gel things. I'm like, I take one of those, and you feel like you just took some drug or something, right? All of a sudden you get all this energy because you just shot of caffeine. And I'm like, oh, that helped. And then I did my next one a year later after I found you guys and started realizing, oh yeah, it's not just you go run for 4 hours. You have to take some food, and you have to train, and you have to run the race a certain way. You don't PR the first half of the race and then try to think you're going to then do the same thing the second half. And then is it a hilly course? Is it a flat course? Is it more uphill the first half, down? There's a lot of things that go into it.
Right, totally. And you're checking them off, my friend. You're putting them in the rear view mirror. So do you have anything else aside from crushing local 5Ks on the agenda for this year, or what's your plan?
So for me, I think I signed up for not quite a half Ironman, but it's a local one in Santa Barbara. It's a fun race, and I'm going to do that end of August, and then take my kid off to college. And then I planning to do the Grand Canyon again in November, but I'm not going to do the rim to rim. I think we're going to go down to Phantom Ranch and have some lemonade and then come back.
Okay.
I've done it twice now, and I think a couple other people are going to do it. And then I do want to, my wife wasn't able to go to Boston this last time. I'll probably give you a ring at some point and see if you can load up another Boston qualifying plan for me.
All right.
Because the Boston qualifying plan is different from running a marathon plan.
It is flat. Yes, it is. A little nuance there. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I noticed that when I said, hey, I want to qualify for Boston, all of a sudden, wait a minute, this run is a little bit harder than the marathon run I was doing before. Yeah, I'd like to do that. And then my plan is to do, I really want to do one full Ironman a year. So I'll check with the team and see what's on the list probably for next year. I know there's some people that try to do 2 a year, but I like to do some other things, and it's a lot away from a lot of family sacrifices.
Totally.
We talk about all the spousal SAPs, and there is that. My wife's it's a drain, and so you need to take some time and take care of that part of your life.
Totally. I hear you. Some if you can stack them together, if you can do you get them 4 or 6 weeks apart, which is possible, then you're like, I get the 2 for 1. But yeah, I did a few years where it was August and October or June and October, and it was not fun. It felt like a job at some point there, which is not
and
great.
I don't, and it's.
No.
I don't want that. You can go do a half Ironman, and those are really fun. That's what I'm doing in August. It's a little shorter than a half, but it's basically a half, and it's in Santa Barbara, and it's beautiful. And
perfect.
Drive up there in the morning and be done, and I don't need to commit the time to train for that. Like you do for a full Ironman. So
that's perfect. I love that.
One a year is good, and run a marathon and do some of the other stuff. There's so much stuff to do, so much stuff the team is involved in and signed up for and doing. There's always some challenge. So
100%. Yeah, there's no downtime. As long as you're staying active and keeping it going, you don't have to be training for a race. As long as you're training for something, you'll be good.
Right. Yeah,
awesome.
Exactly.
Bob, this has been awesome. Hey, I want to thank you so much for joining me.
No, thank you, Coach B.
No worries. It's always great to hear about the journey. I appreciate you sharing that out. It's definitely going to resonate with a lot of our listeners out there who sometimes feel like, I don't understand. I really appreciate you being so authentic. It's going to be a good listen for sure. All right. Awesome.
All right. I lost you for a second there.
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that little Wi-Fi action. But anyway, be well, Bob. Don't get too hot out there, okay? Enjoy your summer.
All right. You too, Coach B. Thank you.
All right. I'll be in touch. See you. Bye-bye.